The Supreme Court shoots down a veteran's ability to obtain disability benefits. Plus, Justice Jackson issues her very first opinion after the court strikes down an appeal. And we're talking with Out 100 honoree and Delaware State Senator Sarah McBride about fighting against the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade ruling. Welcome to Advocate Today. I'm Tracy E. Gilchrist. We begin today in Washington. The Supreme Court has declined to take up the appeal from an Air Force veteran. The veteran challenged the authority of the VA to deny him disability benefits. The Air Force vet was diagnosed with a disability in 2000. 3 years later, he was called into active duty in the Air National Guard and was not receiving benefits during that time. He left active duty service in 2005, but waited a couple of years to ask for retroactive disability pay. A federal court agreed with the VA that the veteran waited too long to request back pay. Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson authored her first written opinion. Brown Jackson authored a dissent siding with an inmate in a death sentence appeal. Davell Chin was sentenced to death in connection with a deadly armed robbery. An accomplice identified Chin as the killer. Chin argued that the accomplice's record indicates a moderate range of intellectual disability. That record was not disclosed to Chin at the trial. Chin says that information could have been used to cast doubt. Sonia Sotomayor was the only justice to join Jackson in her dissent. Delaware State Senator Sarah McBride is the country's first out transgender state senator. She is also one of the 2022 Out 100 honorees. I recently spoke with her about finding inspiration while doing the hard work of igniting change.
This work is challenging, right? Change making is hard. Legislating is really hard. And so we all in this moment in our politics have to find sources of hope and inspiration. I think a lot of times people think that hope and inspiration is organically found. But a lot of times you have to look for it. You have to find it and you have to summon it as you're having those crises of faith.
Yeah.
And I know for me, one of the things that was so important as I got sworn in January of 2021 was to give hopefully others a boost with that image of an out trans person getting sworn in, but also to give me a boost as I entered that next stage in my career serving this community. And that's why I actually had 2 trans teens hold the Bible for me when I was sworn in, because I wanted those young people to see up close and personal what was possible, but also for me, as I took that oath, to be looking at these young people, these young trans people, and find that hope and courage and confidence that they invite in me as I see them, as I imparted on that journey. And so it was a real honor to have those trans teens hold the Bible as I got sworn in. And it's certainly a bit of hope that on down days I think back to and summon.
Wonderful. That's so wonderful. Thank you very much. I want to ask you a little bit about you. You moved quickly within 5 days of Roe v. Wade being overturned. You proposed an amendment to the Delaware state constitution to protect reproductive freedom. And would you talk a little bit about just being so proactive and the necessity in that?
Yeah, as I said, I ran because I believe that state legislatures have a responsibility now more than ever to be that last line of defense for our rights. And there's no issue that I think exemplifies that more than choice, more than access to abortion. This past June, the Supreme Court's decision put that in stark relief. Now, I'm really proud of Delaware that we were proactive even before this. My colleague, before I got to the General Assembly, my colleague, Senator Brian Townsend, who's now our majority leader, introduced and passed legislation codifying access to abortion as protected under Roe, under state law at that time. And that was in 2017. And people thought, why are you doing this? And Brian and the colleagues that he worked on that bill recognized that after the 2016 election, there was a real risk that the Supreme Court would veer to the right, and that these politicians would stop at nothing to undermine access to abortion and undermine Roe v. Wade. And so we passed legislation codifying that right under state law. Even before Roe happened, we passed legislation as a General Assembly during my term to make Delaware a safe haven state to protect patients and providers who are accessing safe and legal abortions in this state from Delaware essentially throwing them under the bus with other states where they're going backwards. We expanded the ability of healthcare providers to a range of healthcare providers to provide abortion care in this state, because we know we'll see more people coming here as a safe haven state to receive this necessary healthcare. And then, as you mentioned, right after the Dobbs decision that undermined and revoked Roe, we introduced a constitutional amendment because ultimately we want to make sure that it's not just protected under state law, which it now is in Delaware, but that it's so protected that a future General Assembly will have a really difficult time taking away that right if, God forbid, anti-choice legislators become a majority in this legislature 30, 40, 50 years down the road. We want to make sure it's in our Constitution so they can't easily undermine it. And if anything, the undermining of Roe is a reminder that we who value rights to bodily autonomy, individual rights, equality under the law, that we have to also play the long game in addition to fighting the battles that are right in front of us. And that's what the constitutional amendment would do. It's about protecting it for the long run.
But, there's this notion that I think a lot of people are discussing lately, which is queer joy, trans joy. Would you talk a little bit about how that kind of joy shows up in your life and why it's so necessary?
It is critical. The reality is there is a lot to scare us right now. There's a lot to demoralize us. But when we summon queer joy, when we summon queer hope, we are summoning what those who wish to roll back on the clock on our progress, what they seek to take away from us. It is said often, but it is true that queer joy and queer hope is a revolutionary and radical act.
Yeah.
Because we're not meant to feel that way. We weren't meant to feel that way 50 years ago, and they're sure as hell trying to make sure that we don't continue to feel that way after 3 decades of progress. But what I find hope in right now, what brings me comfort, is the recognition that the story of our movement is the story of LGBTQ people meeting the challenges of the moment with change that seemed impossible before the crisis started, right? That it's always been in our biggest challenges that we take our most significant steps forward, that in the flames of riots at the Stonewall Inn, our modern movement was born in response to state-sanctioned police violence. It was in the depths of the HIV and AIDS epidemic that we organized and mobilized in new ways. We built our modern movement infrastructure. It was as marriage ban after marriage ban passed in states across the country in 2004 and 2006 that we had conversations with family members, with parents, grandparents, neighbors, classmates, teachers that served to open hearts and change minds. And in the end, lay the foundation for marriage equality to come to every state in this land. It was in 2016 when Pat McCrory, the Republican governor of North Carolina, signed the anti-trans bathroom bill, thinking that it would be his ticket to re-election. That trans people lifted our voices, shared our stories, organized and mobilized, that employers joined us in solidarity, that the community spoke out with one voice against that. And what he thought would be his ticket to re-election ended up being a one-way ticket out of the governor's mansion. Every single time they come for us, we grow stronger.
Yeah. Thank you again to Senator McBride for joining me. She's beyond deserving of that Out 100 honor. You can read more about Sarah McBride's story on Out.com or pick up the 2022 Out 100 featuring the year's most impactful LGBTQ plus changemakers in entertainment, fashion, politics, business, and beyond. See the full list of disruptors and groundbreakers on Out.com. The National Center for Transgender Equality is conducting the largest survey of trans and non-binary people. The goal is to learn about the experience of the community while living in American society. The so-called U.S. Trans Census will compile data on everything from family life to health, safety, and employment. The first survey of this kind was conducted in 2015. This new survey will be much more comprehensive. The results can have a direct impact on policy decisions. It will also arm folks with information to refute unfounded claims about transgender youth. To learn more about the survey, visit ustranssurvey.org. The Advocate channel is available now on all streaming platforms. You can download the app or visit us on YouTube. I'm Tracy E. Gilchrist. I'll see you next time.